So within the component of organizational performance and continuous, we are looking at the way that the school is approaching continuous improvement. So several of the things that we came across from our interviews and through the packet was that they self-initiated several audits to help look more deeply at situations that they wanted to address that were in their schools. So they started this program called Reimagine. The Reimagine audit revealed a large disparity. Well, let me back up a minute. Its focus was mainly to look at culture and structures within the school and culture and climate. And really revealed a large disparity of agreement on different areas of the mission and vision, the job roles and responsibilities amongst stakeholders. The school strategic planning took from that information and incorporated it into 3 areas that they wanted to focus on to address some of the things that they found in this audit. And that was creating more trust, collaboration, especially within the decision-making process, and transparency. So these focused values developed from the audit, this particular audits, and have led changes to new policies and adjusted leadership roles. 2 examples of that are on the screen, where the adjusted model of the 1 executive director was split into 2, 1 over academics, 1 over operations, in an effort to have greater transparency to their community, but also really use the expertise, administrative expertise in the areas that they could affect. And in addition to that, they created a new executive director evaluations and also staff evaluations that are based more on the Colorado State models and evaluation rubrics to be more transparent in how the evaluations of the staff and directors were being held. From this audit, they discussed in interviews and also in the packet that they're developing a 3-year strategic plan that will specifically look at the realignment of their mission and vision. After being in a school for so long, that was quite something that popped up in the audit, that there are a lot of different interpretations of what that mission and vision is in the community and in other stakeholders. So that was something that they wanted to address. And there was evidence of also wide-level stakeholder involvement using the surveys, increasing communication opportunities for participation that is kind of milking down from that strategic plan as they are growing. A second self-initiated audit was done by the Collaborative of Exceptional Education, the CEE, in 2019, and then was repeated in 2022, specifically around the areas of student support services. This is the area that caused the 3 years plus 2, so they self-initiated this audit to see what they could do better. From the audits, there was evidence of many changes made in the student support services. The most recent audit in 2022 listed improvements that included hiring more highly qualified staff, creating positions such as the Director of Student Support Services that oversaw the entire K through 12. They hired a board-certified behavior analyst. Our district has 3 for all our schools. They felt the need for that assistance of behavior K through 12 in classrooms and went ahead and hired a BCBA. They also hired recently a director of gifted curriculum to focus on areas to impact GT learning. There also was increased professional learning around students with disabilities, strengthening multi-tiered systems, and data-driven decisions. I cannot say that at this point, but they've increased that from also the audit reported that. Some areas of note that I wanted just to show, there was an interesting connection. The CEE audit reflected areas of growth were also areas that were noted by our participants that evaluated the school. So they noted that the differentiation strategies within the elementary need to increase. The CEE report also talked about really increasing teachers' understanding about students with disabilities and creating a wider sense of community ownership. And this was almost verbatim what was said by our district student support experts who came in, had the same statement of seeing that, increasing that educational side and also building a community of ownership with students with disabilities. So just that alignment was something I wanted to share. Looking at specific systems and structures around organizational performance, there was evidence of sound board oversight. They used their school advisory council, the SAC, in monitoring key performance indicators, which are very similar to the components like we're talking about, as well as being involved in the surveys that are impacting decision makers. Their strategic plan, as I mentioned before, is looking at mission and vision alignment and increasing communication at all stakeholders. And the board itself has shown a willingness to expand and redefine positions as they go through this process. There was evidence, again, as we talked about in the academic side, of stakeholder involvement in the use of surveys and committees. Additionally, in site visits, parents and families expressed appreciation of having a community of GT learners. And kind of to back this part up, I think I'll stop because I forgot to ask, is there any questions around that culture and climate before we move on? I was trying to get us through, but definitely I wanted to stop and see.
Real quick, Kathy, do you have, how many board members are there on the board, and how many of them, if any, are new this year? Do you know?
Offhand, I do not have that information. I could find it for you, though, and get that to you, and I'm
I'll
sure
ask
that
you
they could
guys
speak
later.
to that, too. I just don't know the number offhand and that exact specific numbers. So, anything else? Okay. Kind of going back into the other three components, we covered the two very in depth. These areas that we want to look at. In finance, well, first we saw that parents and families expressed the appreciation of having the GT community for their learners. And on the finance side, the policies and procedures were compliant in all levels, that they have a reasonable, explainable enrollment projections. In the areas of equity, we can look at Stargates showed on track in demonstrating understanding and capacity for multilingual learners, students with disabilities, and gifted and talented. I do have a couple areas of note. Of course, in this area, there's two things. One, in their GT learning plans was very similar to PRA's. Most advanced learning plans, as you can imagine, about 10% in a school. In a school of gifted and talented, the majority of the student body will have advanced learning plans, which is quite a task to, accomplish doing well. And so the kind of the note then, the information from the district was to continue working on those processes of how to engage a good programming and process so that it's meaningful. Those ALPs are meaningful and not just something to be done. The second note is around the Office of Civil Rights complaints. Over the last 5 years, there have been 9 complaints against Stargate, and only one with a finding from the Office of Civil Rights. The other 8 have been addressed through independent investigation, mediation, and referral for more appropriate agencies. This is a big number, and I kind of wanted to take a minute and kind of work through that process of how the district still has them in an on-track level in this area. And so when the district, through the evaluations that the Experienced District Support Services went through, they looked at the components in the renewal and found on track in that evidence, which would be a solid continuum of services, very knowledgeable personnel who could articulate the systems and programming of students with disabilities. And so that is like one area that the district, we had these conversations. I mean, this has been a conversation that we've had amongst many of our colleagues about this rating, should this drop down. And so that was the first thing we talked about, that the evaluation components in all the areas reflect that they are on track and they've had a lot of changes and can speak to those things. Our second consideration of Stargate's increased proactive preventative mindsets as far as working, this is one of my work with them as a liaison on all my charters, is trying to create really an understanding of child find obligations, being proactive. This really aligns with a lot of the district work also in our manifest, looking at our 504 instructions and our IEPs, we're trying to continually being proactive in that, and I feel that the school has really grown in this area. Additionally, they have done the staff trainings and their participation in district IEP trainings. They're very involved in all those areas, so they're being proactive in this. So they're doing the right things is kind of what we see. It's important to note that OCR complaints have expanded exponentially across the district, state, and nationally. When we talk to mediators, they say that this is an increase that they are seeing. And so this is kind of a trend that we see, that parents may be choosing the Office of Civil Rights to work out concerns that they have about programming and those types of things. So I think that, to me, what this speaks forward is that there needs to be continued growth, and this is something noted in the report, is to continually be educating our educational staff around students with disabilities and our stakeholders, so they understand what the 504 and IEP is supposed to do, and also just continually ensuring that communication pathways are open and understood, so that when conflicts come up, that they can be dealt with directly. So overall, we also see a trend in Stargate's OCR complaints have gone down. Last year, there were 0 complaints. There were 2 this year that were both resolved in what we call quick resolution, which means it doesn't really even get to the office. It's dealt with, and they were able to come together and resolve the situation before the OCR even decided if it needed to be investigated. So just to I just wanted to jump in, because I know this is a huge number and impactful. Just wanted to give you some of our discussion points and reasoning as we discussed this rating, and overall felt that all the systems are in place and doing what they need to be doing in their support services to keep that rating up at green. Any questions? That was a lot of information on a topic that's kind of confusing. And
so I ask this question because it's in line with what we're talking about now. And in the recommendation, maybe this is something, I don't know who would want to address it, but you note that the IEP percentages are at 4.3 at Stargate compared to the state and district's roughly 10% average. And then you also noted that the 504s are higher at Stargate than they are at the district and state levels. I didn't see okay, what's the significance of that? And I wanted to ask that question. What's the significance?
I think I will share, I have my thoughts too, but just to share, when we were in the interviews, that question was asked, that your IEP numbers are low. They were very transparent in their conversation about that, and saying that they probably do have unidentified students in that lower range. And so part of that gifted and talented is also in a very, what we would call the word masking. A lot of gifted, talented students are able to mask that disability. And so it's really educating their instructional staff and to be more able to identify disabilities, especially with twice exceptional students, and be able to identify those numbers. I think that what I appreciated is that they were transparent. Yes, we know they're low, and we know that there's probably unidentified kids, and we wish to continue to build our processes to be able to identify that. So I won't speak for them. They'll probably speak to that themselves. That was the information they brought to us. Again, the 504 is really interesting. I found it really interesting. The districts is about 6%, schools like PRA and Stargate around that 8 to 10%. The state as a whole is 3%, but then if you look at one specific district, Boulder Valley, it itself is 7% for their average. So it kind of goes into this whole, it's a very vague gray 504 law in, the ADA, and this is actually supposed to be giving out new information to help quantify that a little bit better. It's supposed to be coming out soon. But 504s are definitely looking at students that that parents sometimes are more willing to advocate for their students for a 504 in certain areas, and that we might see a difference in that percentages. Additionally, those 504s might be unidentified kids, and that's part of their process and their goals of their support team to be able to use their process, the data-driven information to make those decisions.
I'll just add to what Kathy said and note that this dramatic increase that PRA noted around 504s and that Stargate's had is true of a number of our schools that tend to be more affluent and in the north part of our district, with Legacy High School on that quadrant being an example of having really dramatic increases in 504s for students who have ADHD, anxiety, depression, dyslexia being fairly common conditions or descriptors for students who are seeking 504. So we've seen a dramatic increase in a lot of district-managed schools as well.
So I think that's a continued conversation. And I really appreciate all the charters are been really involved in our 504 education process that we're going through right now with Sarah Pencer, our coordinator, has really been trying to bring the aspects of 504 more alive to all schools and understanding it, because it's very complex at some, students are very complex. And so it's in a complex law, it's very gray, yeah. Thank you. Any other questions?
That's
Okay.
good. Thank you, Kathy.
The last slide, there is a positive equity on this part too, is that the physical space is well thought of at Stargate. I think that was mentioned before. The last slide of bright spots is in the culture and climate, that we found that there were many options for clubs, athletic activities, and unique classes for student engagement at Stargate. And the student presenters we wanted to mention at the site visit were very well spoken, willing to share their stories, knowledgeable about their school mission. They also talked about different ways that their voices are empowered through leadership groups called Flight Crew and Sources of Strength. And there was evidence of the positive behavior programs and social emotional structures throughout the K through 12 during this event. That concludes the data from the recommendation. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Tara, you're up again, or? You have a different crew? Different voices. All right. Come on up, guys.
Hello? Okay. Hi, I'm Lynn. I'm with the DAC. I represent, I'm a parent on the DAC. I've been with the DAC for 9 years and on the Charter Renewal Committee for the last 3.
Good evening. My name is Ashwini Sharat, and I'm a DAC parent as well. And this is my first year on the DAC committee. I'll be talking about areas of growth, and Lynn is going to cover strengths.
All right. And we'd also like to give a thanks to Stargate for letting us into your school for the entire day. All right. So just to review, going over the mission and vision, culture and climate, and organizational performance, that's what the DAC had their focus lens on. For strengths, we saw a consistent theme of appreciation from staff and families for an invested learning community for gifted learners. Non-instructional staff also felt connected to families and understood their connection to the mission and vision. Positive and collaborative student engagement inside and outside the classroom, including student-driven learning in the secondary. New leadership and Board of Admin have connected and are responsive and have taken on the critical role of building trust and community, which is noted by staff and families. And new leadership is well-versed in GT learning and committed to forward strategic planning, goal setting, willingness to review structures and internal cultures to move school forward with the community. And I think
For the areas of growth, the first one talks about clarification, providing more clarification around acceleration policies. We could use increased parent and student understanding of policies and procedures related to academic acceleration, providing detailed insights into the utilized data along with any specific considerations and timelines will contribute significantly to fostering a clearer understanding of the process. The second point is providing more staff training on 504s, MTSS, and other resources. The school could empower instructional staff with a comprehensive understanding of the purpose and utilization of 504 plans, MTSS, as well as additional resources with an objective to enhance the capacity of educators to provide increased support to students with disabilities, ensuring a more inclusive and supportive learning environment. The third point is on training on differentiated educational programs, which I think, oh, sorry. Is it, yeah, sorry about that. Our recommendation is to provide instructors with more training around differentiated instructional strategies so that they can address the individual academic requirements of each gifted student, particularly at the elementary level. The fourth point is more clarity around admissions and enrollment process, which could involve ensuring alignment with the mission and vision of the school, with a particular focus on clarifying eligibility criteria. The goal here is to establish a synchronized and transparent flow of information, fostering a shared understanding among all stakeholders involved in the admissions and enrollment processes. The last point is on enrollment and retention of underrepresented demographics. So we could explore potential avenues for expanding both the enrollment and retention rates of underrepresented student demographics as compared to the surrounding geographical schools. That's it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions?
I have a quick question. You guys, you had mentioned in some of the positive things that they are doing, some feedback from families. Did you interview parents, staff, and students? And was there crossover between parents that were also staff, or were they parents that were not staff? So the parents that were interviewed were also staff members? But like a mix of, okay, thank you.
Anything else? All right, Stargate, it's your turn.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today to get to share a little bit about our school. This is our 6th month on the job, but it feels like it's been forever home. And my name is Robin Green, and I am the Executive Director of Academics here at Stargate. And I want to share a little bit about my background because I live and breathe gifted and twice exceptional learners. So I most recently came from the state. I was the supervisor of gifted education overseeing our twice exceptional cadre and our monitoring. So yay, we're doing monitoring and working on twice exceptional at Stargate. Prior to that, I was the director of gifted education in Denver Public Schools. And then I also was gifted nursing services as well. So I was the director of nursing services, Section 504 and ADA. And all of that to say, I feel like all of those pieces have helped bring me to this space at Stargate because we have such an opportunity to continue to grow. Most importantly, I have a son who's been at Stargate since kindergarten, and he's twice exceptional. He has dyslexia, dysgraphia, inattentive type ADHD, and anxiety. So we have a lot of fun at my house, a lot of fun. He's incredible. And I have been fortunate since kindergarten to have the supports, and I'm seeing him thrive. And that's what I want for every single one of our parents and students to walk away with, to know that they are seen and that they're heard and cared for.
So we've got a unique model having two leaders, and so that's why we're both kind of up here presenting. So I'm Wayne Granger. I'm the Executive Director of Operations and Finance. So again, we just finished our 6th month at Stargate. And so where I come from, prior to this, I served 10 years as Executive Director at Flagstaff Academy Charter School in Longmont. So I was at the St. Vrain District as Executive Director, and I served in this very same model of having an academic as well as an operational leader. At some point, I was even head of school for a while, which was kind of crazy. But actually have an amazing connection with PRA. April and Adam know that as well. But I'm also a founding family member. So I was a founding family member of Flagstaff Academy as a charter school. So I am a charter champion through and through. All 3 of my daughters went through Flagstaff Academy, kindergarten through 8th grade. And then I was on the board of directors there for 4 years as well. So I've seen every aspect of the charters. And this was an amazing when Lynn Whitney decided to retire. Then I was able to step into this great role, and I'm so fortunate for that. And I'm happy to be able to represent the school.
We also want to thank both our directors, Goldstein and Assad Lucas, as now I'm up here and I'm like, well, for coming out, and Director Potter and our superintendent for getting a chance to come out and see what we're about and what we do. And I invite all of you to continue to come out, no matter when. It can be scheduled, it can be a tour, it can just be a drive-by, pop in. Like, we're always open. Our doors are always open. And I want to thank some of the people in the crowd here. We do have our board of directors who are here with us. Most are either here in person or they're online watching, and we do have 7 board of directors. So, and I want to thank our leadership staff who's also here, and our parents who have been able to come. I see you. So who have been able to make it tonight and who spoke about Stargate. So our mission, I know that you can read, I'm still gonna read it to you, but that Stargate will provide a differentiated program designed specifically to meet the needs of identified intellectually gifted learners in order to challenge each student's academic abilities, support their unique emotional needs, promote individual character development, and encourage a lifelong love of learning. And our vision is that we will be a leader and innovator in intellectually gifted education by providing a learning environment to meet gifted students' needs. So this is actually one of our teams, our Brawling Bananas, and they were competing in one of the robotics tournaments. And you know, when people think about gifted learners, they have lots of different things that come to mind about what it means to be gifted. And what I wanted to make sure and share was that one of the things that we do is we are following the ECEA definition of gifted education that is also followed by RAU. And so one of the things that I think about with that definition, I'm not going to read it to you, don't worry. But the thing that strikes me about the definition and that makes me so excited for Stargate is that, according to the definition, that our students are accomplished in one or more domains, and they require special provisions to meet their educational programming needs. Additionally, and I've written, and this is not a book, Sal, I promise, I've written 2 books on gifted Latinx learners, English language learners, and creating culturally responsive gifted programs. So the other piece in this definition that touches my heart is that they recognize that giftedness is across students with disabilities, students who speak multiple languages, across all socioeconomic, ethnic, and cultural populations. Wanted to share a little bit about some of the myths that we have. Thank you. Because when I talk about this definition of gifted learners, I still know that when people hear the word gifted, sometimes they have different words come into their mind. And I know that our students face this out in the regular world. I know some of our parents face this. And so just wanted to talk to some of the myths that we still hear and are combating. One is that all children are gifted. All children are special. All children have talents. All children deserve to grow and learn. But when we talk about giftedness, what we are talking about is that state statute. We're talking about the increased volume and the gray matter in the brain. In the same way that we wouldn't say that all students are students with disabilities or all students are English language learners, we still hear that a piece, and it's not to make anyone feel better or less than, it's to understand that these students are different. Gifted students don't need help, they'll do fine on their own. I heard that as a classroom teacher. I'm sure some of you have probably heard that as well. They deserve to learn something new every day and not be the teacher for other students. Giftedness is high achieving. I wish that was the case. My son would be right up there if that was the case. No. I'm not gonna say any more about that. Okay, gifted learners are more mature than same age peers. I think sometimes that happens when we're seeing them with their same age peers in different settings that can feel that way, but they have that asynchronous development. You know, so that maturity isn't always catching up to, although they can sound like they are 30 years old when they're 5, they're still 5, sometimes feeling like they're 2, right? If you're identified as gifted, then you must be gifted in every subject. That's why we have strength areas. That's why we look at how do we make sure that we individualize based on students' passions and interests. We know this is not true, that gifted students cannot have disabilities, yet there are still some who feel that way. Acceleration's harmful, socially and emotionally. It's actually, there are over 20 different ways to accelerate. I'm sure you already know this, I'm preaching to the choir. And we still get that sometimes too. And this one, gifted education is elitist. And I heard a student say that she thinks it's elitist to not have gifted education because then we're prioritizing one student's education over another. So these are some of the myths that our students are kind of combating out in the real world every day. I'm gonna pass it to Wayne.
So I'm going to go over a little bit of the history of Stargate. If you're familiar with the Charter Schools Act in Colorado, it was passed in 1993 by the voters, and Stargate was the 8th public charter school in the history of the state to be chartered in the state of Colorado. So we obviously have a lot of history and some very interesting history. Going back to 1994 when they used the historic East Lake School building to open up. A lot of people have a lot of unfond memories, I understand, of this building. But that's when we opened up at about 125 students. In 2003, they opened up the Cottonwood Lakes campus on Crowder Boulevard. This gave them a capacity up to about 550 students. They expanded that campus up to about 650 students in 2007. And then we were fortunate when they decided to make the move to go to K-12, because up till then it had been a K-8 campus. In 2016, we built our current state-of-the-art campus that has a capacity of 1,600 students. It's kind of where we're coming from. One of the things I wanted to address and kind of talk about as it relates to who we are, and I believe this comes to some of the feedback we received as it relates to making sure we're representing the community that's around us. This is just pulling data from Colorado Department of Education as it relates to our enrollment demographics. And what I've done to organize this is this has been sorted by non-white percentage of students, just to show. And again, this is using schools that are within our enrollment area. Being a 100% commuter type school and having enrollment, we're drawing from a broad area. And so that's how this was selected, by no other way, just to kind of show that this is who our geographic area is. So in elementary, you can see that we are up at number 9 in terms of the number of non-white students in our school, just below Hunters Glen Elementary. We look at the middle school numbers, kind of similar again, looking at other schools that are in our area. We're just about the middle, slightly above the middle in terms of how we compare to other schools. And when we get to high school, again, same thing, right there in the middle. This slide here actually then shows kind of where the district lands in terms of percentage of non-white at just over 58%. And we're landing right in the middle of those schools that are in our geographic area. I did add on the 2 District 27J schools only because we do draw some students from the east to us, and so I wanted to make sure that I showed that where they would land as well. So that was the point of showing these slides, is just to show that we are representing what we believe is our community geographically as the best that we can. And I know that Dr. Green has some ideas of what we're going to do, especially to pull up our Hispanic and Latino populations.
So I know that Kathy shared a little bit, and as well as our DAC team, around some of the things that we do. And we polled our teachers and said, when you think about Stargate as teachers, what do you think of? Who are we? What do we do? And these were the words that came up that they pulled, that, as you guys have seen a word cloud before, populated. So I know Kathy had already shared a little bit about our SPF, and one of the things that we're looking at is specifically within our UIP, we're looking at our middle school learners in ELA and math, and we are looking, kind of focusing on our students with disabilities. Right now, you're seeing this overall where we exceed in those different areas, but our growth is still an area for us to continue to grow in where we're at meets. And the reason for looking at our students with disabilities, specifically in middle school even, is because what we were seeing is that we had a couple of years ago, we had approaching, then we were meets, then we were exceeds, then we were meet. So what I'd like to see is us have that steady through line and have that consistency there for our students with disabilities. They deserve that. Post-secondary, again, just some information around our SAT for both reading, writing, and math. Again, another way to look at it. But we also, one thing that I'm really glad for and grateful for Rob and our counseling team. Rob is our principal over our secondary, if you didn't know. Wave, Rob, wave. So he has been our constant as we've had multiple leadership changes at this level. Rob has been our constant. And Lynn have been our constants. And so one of the things that I'm really grateful that they do is that we do ask where students are going. So we try to figure out, hey, what is post-secondary life like for you? And so you'll see that we have the 100% graduation rate, but as we're tracking this and asking our students, this is from 23, you'll see that the majority of them are going to four-year colleges. Some choose the two-year. But of those four-year colleges, 68% of them are out of state. We do have military enrollment. We just had military recruiters in last week as well. I feel like they're coming in waves to make sure that our students understand that they have multiple opportunities and pathways. That even though a lot of our students are going on to college, that may not be the path for you. That's okay. We want you to explore your passion because we want you to be lifelong learners. And then you'll see other, and that 10% is really around those students who typically take a gap year. So these are our students. And on the toughest days, they remind us of why we do what we do. Whether it's at National History Day competition or a Halloween parade or an elementary concert or Harry Potter night, right? Our students are centered in everything we do. The picture in I'm looking top right. This was the first year. Our student council came to us and said, hey, we want to do senior parking lots. So our focus, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, is all around our continuing culture, right? And making sure that we have this strong culture and that we feel a strong sense of community K-12. So our seniors came, they did a proposal to both Wayne and I, and then they talked through how much it was going to cost, why our facilities manager didn't have to do anything or clean it up, that they would take care of all the work. And we listened to their proposal, asked them some more questions, and then said, yeah, let's do it. And then they showed up on a day when we were all on our professional learning day, showed up at 7:30 in the morning, ready to paint. And that has been one of the biggest morale boosts for our seniors. And this picture, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of our flight school. So similar to PRA, we do have an opportunity that we have our students and student council will welcome in our 6th graders and our 9th graders. And what we're looking at is how do we create a flight school for our families? But they start right away, and this happens a couple of days before school starts, where we invite our 6th graders, new 6th graders, new 9th graders, actually all 6th graders, right, Rob? All 6th graders, to come in and just be together as a community. And so we call it flight school. Now, one of the things that attracted me as a parent to Stargate back in kindergarten several years ago was the statement around lifelong love of learning. And with being new to Stargate, both Wayne and I really appreciated the feedback from DAC, from the district, because it was aligning with what we were seeing as well. So it's been like, oh, this is sort of that additional impetus to help us move forward with this work. And, you know, I think it was good to see that our board has also been very aware of this and has really set our priorities as a school moving forward, grounded in continuous improvement with culture and climate. So I want to talk to some of the notes. And I know I've been talking a long time. Do you guys have any questions so far? You can interrupt me at any point or at the end, whatever. So back in 2023, spring of 2023, there was an audit, third-party audit, and you heard that Kathy spoke to that earlier around culture and climate. A lot of that happened because our board was hearing teachers were struggling when it came to, hey, we've got so many administrators turning over. We want to make sure we are in the best shape, that we are healthy for our students. And so the board took action. And they contracted with our Reimagine group. And what they came up with, and you saw this on Kathy's, was really that we as a school need to focus on trust, transparency, and collaboration. And so that, with our board of directors, became our focus for this year and next year and the year after. It's starting out 3-year plan, be a 5-year plan. It needs to be continuous. This isn't something that's going to be a one and done. And what Wayne and I did on the first day that we had everybody back is we had them look at this report. And we talked about attending to healing. Because our teachers had expressed and our staff members had expressed, it's been a hard few years with COVID, with administration change. We need something different. So I use the metaphor of dancing with elephants. And I was like, we have to dance with the elephants. Let's name the elephants in the room. And we, as a group, and our board of directors were there as well. And our staff pulled apart, what does it mean to have trust? What does it look like, sound like? How do I know if I have it? We did the same thing with collaboration and transparency, and then shared that information with them as well. And then making sure that we are continuing that as we go through every professional learning, that it's part of all of our conversations, that they understand it's not a one and done for us. We are committed to you being your best so our students can have their best. In that, Reimagine also brought forward that we might need to look at our vision and mission. You know, that because like what Dax saw, that there were some inconsistencies with either what people saw or what they thought. We had even people saying, well, I think it's a great mission and vision, we just need to do it. And then other people saying, we need to totally redo it. So our board hired a third-party contractor through UNC, and they are helping us just a couple weeks ago doing and reviewing our vision and mission with different focus groups. So we want to make sure. And then tomorrow, I have our first meeting of our student task force. Students who came to me, one said, I'm a little skeptical, but I'm kind of optimistic, so I'll give you a try after talking to him. And they're going to look at our vision and mission as well, because we know that we need our students' voices in it. We also shared our shared decision-making matrix, which was something that was really important to our teachers and our staff members. Why do you make the decisions you make? Who's making the decisions? Wait, what? Where's my voice in that? And we wanted to make sure that we had that. And our school leaders are translating that out, articulating that out with the teachers to see what else needs to change. And then, like I said before, the inclusion of students. And we're even including our students on our DEI committee.
So this is one of the big initiatives that we brought forward this year was kind of our organizational theme for the year. We've really driven a lot of our work with coming off of the Reimagine report related to trust, transparency, and collaboration off of that. And what it is it's called For. And what are you for? If you're familiar with Jeff Henderson's book about what are you for, really what it drives is that it's a unfortunately, a unique way to see things right now, which is what do you stand for, not what you stand against. And that's a unique position. And we really brought that forward to talk about who are we as Stargate and what do we stand for. And what we stand for is Stargate stands for our students. Stargate stands for our team, which is all of us that are here. Stargate stands for our community. We also did a service project this year, and Stargate is for me. And this is something that we've constantly come back to when we do either staff appreciation events, we do student events. These posters are plastered throughout the building. This is something that we're using to kind of give us a springboard to this improvement that we're looking for, to rebuild on what work is coming from the board as the new leaders. And doing what we can, we're bringing forward this type of philosophy of we're all going to be in this together, and they see us in the trainings, they see us involved in every way, everything that we can to show our team, and that just turns out to how it reflects in how students feel in our building as well.
So we wanted to talk through some of the areas of note, just like April did with PRA. And these things have been on our mind since we've gotten here and from our board of directors' mind for a little while now. So one of the things that was mentioned in DAC's report was the need for articulation around the acceleration process. We completely agree. So we have a new policy that was placed. It mirrors Adams 12's policy, and that was just passed this last summer. So now we're in the process of articulating what that looks like and how it may be different in elementary to middle school to high school. So all of that said, we cannot over-communicate enough. Like there is no such thing as over-communication. So that is one of the things that we're continuing to do is, okay, let's come back in our professional learning communities. What does this look like? What does this mean? So we are going through that process and having that conversation with them. The other piece around MTSS, and if you need, feel free to ask me any question in the middle. The other piece around MTSS is that we have a really solid process in elementary, and it's still new. And so we have a really strong process for the last 2 years that our director of special pops working with our interim AP set up going forward, where it includes all of our teachers. We all have a common understanding, or we're working towards that common understanding. In secondary, we still have opportunity for growth. So while we have a process, it is very new, and we are working on making sure what we talk about collective ownership of students with disabilities, that all of our teachers truly understand the need and the reason behind an MTSS process. So that is one thing we're working on. We do have the process in place, and as we're jumping off and getting started, it's been a little bumpy. So we are coming back together as an admin team with our director of special pops and our teachers to say, hey, what's not working about this process right now? Tell us, because we thought one thing of how it should go, but if this isn't working for you, we need to know, because we need to make sure it's working for our kids. And then our professional learning communities. One of the things that DAC mentioned, that I think Kathy mentioned, that is part of our mission and vision is differentiation. So PLCs are new this year, professional learning communities. I apologize. They started last year for elementary, and we are in full force this year in elementary with our PLCs all around differentiation. What are instructional best practices for gifted and twice exceptional learners? How do we try that out? It was really important for me and for our new elementary leader who is watching from home that we create a space where our teachers can take risks, where they're allowed to take risks, try something new, learn from that, and try something new again. So the PLCs have become that place for them to fall in a safe place for us. And then the professional development on differentiation, that has been one of our areas in our strategic plan that we focused on. That came from that other report that Kathy mentioned around the Collaborative for Educational Excellence. And that particular report pointed the same thing out. We have this incredible mission and vision around differentiation. How are we living it? How does everybody talk about it? So that is what we are doing. We've had professional development around differentiation from day one, And even looking at beyond academics, differentiation in academics, how do we differentiate for social emotional? And so we have a couple of speakers coming out to talk to that very thing in February. How are we doing that for not only for our students, how can we do differentiation without it being a ton of extra work for us, but how are we differentiating for them socially and emotionally and mentally? Are we truly meeting their needs? So I'm really excited for February. The other piece that I wanted to make sure that I shared was that with our professional development plan, there's an intentional plan, and we have layered in differentiation through our walkthroughs. How are we seeing it? When are we seeing it? What does it look like? As part of our RANDA goals as well. And still talking to the teachers about just try something out. It's okay if it doesn't work, because we want you to do something innovative for yourself, for your students. That's research-based. We do talk about that too. I know I'm talking a lot. We're gonna make him talk in a minute, so. So another area, bless you, another area of continuous improvement was equal access. And I love this picture because this was outside our learning specialist's door right at the beginning of the school year. And I love that she is bringing forward both her heritage and her language and sharing that with the students, but really that idea of let today be the start of something new. You know, so the pieces that DAC brought forward around our professional development, around making sure that people can articulate what's happening with MTSS, that we, and you know, you all brought this forward a little bit earlier, but that we are truly meeting our child find obligation. What does that look like in students who may mask? How do we do that with twice exceptional learners? And we're looking at implicit bias and how that may impact how we look at our students. So that's part one. We're in our second year of our DEI committee, but really this committee is just started finding its voice. So we have the inclusion of parents, students will be in this committee, as well as our faculty, really looking at, and that's part of that implicit bias piece, is our language inclusionary? Are the structures and the systems inclusionary as a whole? And if not, where do we need to make those changes? We're looking forward to marketing in both Spanish and English. We actually did that this year for the first time to our preschool families. We saw a huge increase in the number of students who applied, who took tests, and so to get into Stargate as part of our enrollment process. And we're just in the process where we are starting to score, look at our rubric, look at all of the body of evidence to make sure that we are making sure that we have our students. And so I look forward to sharing those numbers later. Do not have them yet because we're still in the process. Collective ownership. And collective ownership of our students with special education needs is huge. Not only is there a personal reason for me that started long before I came into this role, but our kids are all our kids. When I worked in more of a traditional school, I would hear, well, the gifted teacher takes them, so I don't have to do anything with them. That's not what they said, but that's what it felt like. Gifted teacher takes them. They go to intervention. The interventionist takes them. These are all our kids. They are gifted 24/7. They are twice exceptional 24/7. That is why we have that connected throughout all of our work around what does it mean to collectively own this work with our students. Community outreach. We've done a lot so far in working with our community, but what I really want to make sure of is that, and we have some immediate just neighbors, but that again, what we're sharing with the community, does that make sense? Is it landing right? How do we need to share that in a way that it could be received well? And then our enrollment process. So our enrollment process has changed and evolved over the last couple of years. And I smile when I look at Angela, because Angela, she's over here. Wave, Angela. She is our director of special populations. And she has worked really hard to make sure that this is an equitable process. She's worked really hard, not just her, there are other systems and people in place to make sure that we're using a true body of evidence that is not one score. One score should never make or break anybody. And how do we have that body of evidence? Which again is why I liked this process, because there was a huge body of evidence that got put forward for you all to see. So continuous improvement there. And when we think forward, what's the next 5 years going to look like? What's the next 30 years? What's the next 40 years going to look like at Stargate? We've been thinking about how we make sure that we have neuroaffirming classrooms, right? So what does that mean? That we are making sure that we are continuously thinking about all of the students with, again, twice exceptionalities, sensitivities. We do a pretty good job so far, and we have areas to grow in this. Culturally responsive gifted education, every single person has a culture. How do we make sure that there are mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors for our students in the curriculum? So we're about to embark on a curriculum audit to look at that. Can our students see themselves? All of our students see themselves, and are they able to see people who don't look like them as well? And then recruiting and retaining. So recruiting specifically, as you saw, our numbers of Hispanic students who are at Stargate and that we've been able to attract are much lower. I was joking with Chris and I was like, you know, if we could have a bus, he's like, oh, Robin, if everybody could have a bus. And what he knows and what he shared with me is that our community, specifically our Hispanic and Latinx community, have said, I want a school in my neighborhood. Right? I want to be able to walk my kiddo to school. So what we're going to do is engage different members of the community and ask, what is it that you need? What is it that we can do to not market and sell like, hey, come to Stargate, but what is it that you need? What is it you need to see when you walk into a school to make it feel like home for you? The inclusion of student voice. And then family engagement. We are restarting and relaunching our parent education series. That's going to start in February. We're starting with what we've heard the needs are, but then we're going to officially poll our families too. What do you want? So I can make up things all day long, but what do you want to do?
All right, I'm going to start wrapping it up. So
He's the short one.
Yes.
I mean, I know I'm shorter, but he's much more brief than I am.
So as we mentioned here, we'll be going into our 30th year this coming fall, which is a tremendous source of pride for Stargate, having been the 8th charter school in the public in the state of Colorado. To still be here and be going strong and grown like we have is something we're very proud of. So we're obviously planning some celebrations. So I saw Stacy Tempest, our communications manager in the back. She's all hyped up for a big party, as well as Sean Schaefer from our board of directors. We're looking at do some great celebrations, engaging our alumni, because we have a lot of them, and making sure that we're also engaging our community. So one of the things I want to bring up, okay, what does 30 years look like? So I kind of did a little bit of research here and brought up all these things here with an iPhone and Google and podcasts and flat screens, all these things. None of these existed when Stargate opened. So everybody that's back here that's smiling and nodding, you're my age. Same thing as goes with Friends and Seinfeld and ER, or we outlived must-see TV. And that's something that we're proud of. We did not outlive The Simpsons or Wheel of Fortune. They're still going, but Pat is retiring. But the interesting thing is that when you think about what is this fabric of our society and our culture, right? Stargate is that for our community for the last 30 years. And we're looking forward to what's going to be that next 30 years as we're going forward. And this was such a great picture, especially coming in brand new this year. Coming from a K-8 school, coming to a high school has been enlightening. But this senior sunrise, and you can't read the sign there, says it's the first day of their last year at Stargate. That's the class of 2024 that's right there. And so it'll be my first experience with a graduating senior class. I'm looking forward to it. But we know that the pride that we have in our community, the pride that we have within our staff, within our students, and the community that supports us, including the district, is what's going to make us know that we're going to keep going for the next 30 years.
And I just want to end on this quote before you guys ask me questions or we start talking through some different things. But I just wanted to share this. This is one of my favorite statements by Linda Silverman. Giftedness is not what you do or how hard you work. It is who you are. You think differently. You experience life intensely. You care about injustice. You seek meaning. You appreciate and strive for the exquisite. You are painfully sensitive. You are extremely complex. You cherish integrity. Your truth-telling has gotten you into trouble. Should 98% of the population find you odd, seek the company of those who love you just the way you are. You are not broken. You do not need to be fixed. You are utterly fascinating. Trust yourself. Thank you. Thanks, Lori.
Anybody have comments or questions?
I have a couple questions. You guys talked about the trust, collaboration, and transparency. Can you guys talk a little bit about the efforts being made to build or strengthen some of those relationships with the parent community?
I can talk a little bit about it. I didn't fix traffic, but I improved it. So that was just a classic process of listening to parents. I mean, it clearly was. We're a very large school. We're 100% commuter, as most charter schools are, and so there was a lot of concern and frustration. And as leaders, the only way you can start building that trust and transparency is to let people be heard. And so when you do that, people are just more willing to then give you suggestions, and they're also willing to say, okay, well, you've heard us and this is where we're going, and so we're going to go along. And that, enable us over the course of, 4 or 5 weeks, make some drastic improvements. But it's the same process that we're using internally with staff. It's the same process staff uses with students. And so it's, being here for 6 months, we still have a long way to go. But I think from my standpoint in the operations side, that's one thing I can show is I know how important that is for people to feel heard. And that's just an organizational value regardless of where you're at.
I worry that we're painfully honest at times, when it came to the traffic or even in our coffee chats that we've had. So what we do is we hold monthly coffee chats or, decaffeinated coffee chats if they're at night. And we try to make sure that we have some in the morning, some in the evening to cater to parents who can't make one or the other. And sometimes we have parents who will show up to both, and in that we bring forward discussions, whether it's, hey, how's sources of strength going? What do you think? Or let's talk a little bit more about this. To really giving our families a platform to share with us what's working well, what's not working well, and to ask those questions. Sometimes those are tough questions, and we welcome those tough questions because, again, if we're not dancing with the elephants, then we're not going to be moving forward for our students. So that's one of the things. And then the other thing, Courtney, is I have started talking with families one-on-one. Right now, it's been those families who have reached out, and the next phase, going with this parent education piece, is to make sure that I send that out to everybody to say, hey, I'm holding these listening sessions one-on-one. It's important that you're heard, because what it's doing for me is allowing me, like we were in the 4 months when DAC came, to start hearing some of those things that they pointed out for us. So next phase is listening sessions. I've been holding listening sessions with staff, with all of our department leads, with all of our department chairs, in addition to our administrators. And then we bring that data together to say, okay, what's been the through line? What do we need to focus on? Long answer.
All right, I have one more. Thank you for that. You said you have 7 board members. How many of them are new, and how many of them are at the end of their time?
We have one brilliant new person. She's our vice president. That's Lindsay Paquette. And then end of our time, we have 3. I still don't know. Do we have 4? I don't want to believe it. Okay. Our 2 independents. So Wayne, sorry, go ahead.
So I guess the question then for me is, with the number of administrative changes that Stargate has experienced, with the number of staff turnover, with the number of changing students, and now with having over half the board changing, what kind of things are you guys putting in place to ensure that the big vision that you guys have been talking about all night stays consistent and doesn't change? I hope it would improve and grow and, change within reason, but doesn't have a complete 180 when we have new leadership in place.
It doesn't regress, right? So I think one of the things that we will have some of our members who are continually staying on to help lead that work, saying, hey, this is our strategic plan. I think our SAC surveys will help with that, because it's very important for us as an organization to make sure we're listening to our community, as well as the work we're doing with the staff is around the collective ownership, around the PD, around trust and transparency. So it's really us keeping those open lines of communication strategically. Is there anything else that I've missed?
The only thing that I would add would be I'm kind of a unicorn in that I was on the board of directors for a charter school for 4 years, and also as board president. I'm also one of the facilitators for the Colorado League of Charter Schools for board governance and leadership. And so I come with a unique perspective of being able to be a sounding board for them. And I also have been, through 14 years that I've been in charter school leadership, I've got a lot of experience onboarding and offboarding board members. And I'm hoping that that's going to give us a lot, along with the strategic plan. The plan's the key. We're going to have a plan. We're going to get a roadmap to what we're going to do. But we've got unique talents in our building that are going to help us make that transition.
I really appreciate that question, because as we were talking, what that also made me think of is, again, the buy-in from our community. Making sure that our community not only can articulate this, but that they also agree with this. And we have shared that at a couple of different presentations, but really getting their information, and maybe this comes through a survey and processing aloud, but that we look at getting buy-in from our families on that.
That's great. Thank you so much. You guys have done a wonderful job, the whole team at Stargate. I have to disclose I am a Stargate parent, so I have witnessed firsthand some of the major changes that you guys have done and gone through. And I am a little nervous. I don't want you guys to go anywhere and let
we're
the
not going
parking
anywhere.
lot go back to what it was. But, you know, I think everything that you guys are discussing and talking about, and the plans that you guys have and the vision that you guys have, it is something that the community at large can really buy into. And so that's why I asked that question of what are we going to do to make sure this withstands the test of time and we don't go off in some other direction. So thank you for clarifying on that, and thank you. Welcome to Adams 12, of course, but thank you for all the hard work that you guys have done and jumped right in to do. And thank you to the rest of the staff and the board for doing it as well.
Thank you. And kicking and screaming isn't a strategic plan. Like if they wanted to change it, I'd be like, no, we can't. But like you were saying, it's really making sure that we have our community as a part of it too.
I just had, I guess, a comment or a reflection, maybe an ask. We'll see.
All of the above.
All of the above, yes. And I love the background that you bring to your role, Dr. Green, with your focus on CLD and twice exceptional learners. And I was trying to get some statistics on the number of gifted and talented students who also have a disability. And it varies greatly because, you know, testing and accessing testing and so on and so forth. But one person reported it was as high as 1 in 6 students. And so I guess my reflection and my ask for this Stargate community is to continue, because I've heard some really great things, lean into that twice exceptional learner to make sure you're meeting the needs of, you know, all of the needs of students. Because my feeling is that, and this is relevant for Prospect Ridge Academy too, with their increase in both gifted and talented learners and 504s, that I think we're going to be seeing more of this. And we all know that our twice exceptional learners don't fit well into the either gifted and talented or special education buckets. They're their very own animal. And everyone up here can kind of speak to that because we have kids who are twice exceptional. But yeah, please continue to lean into that.
Thank you.
And I want to say I was very excited to hear when you came to Stargate. And Wayne, I don't know you as well, but I'm very excited as well for you. But you know, I've seen Robin in different capacities and presenting, and so Stargate is very lucky. And I, you know, while Dr. Potter was talking and you were responding, and you used the word regress, I appreciate that, because not so long ago, well, first off, I have children, yes, who are twice exceptional. My youngest has not been identified as GT yet. He's only in preschool, but he is visually impaired. And so I sit as the current president for the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado, Parents of Blind Children. And I had a parent share a story about trying to apply her child, who is almost fully blind, has some light perception, apply to Stargate, and was less than welcoming process. And so I think with this new leadership, this new vision, moving forward, experience with Twice Exceptional will be such a welcoming tone and just a breath of fresh air, because I know that was a really, really discouraging process for that parent, and just some of the things said and done. And so, yeah, I really appreciate your experience and embracing, Twice Exceptional, because it's hard.
That breaks my heart
Yeah.
to hear that. And my worry, my fear is that parent isn't alone.
Yeah.
And I want our parents to know they are not alone in getting what is best for their children, no matter what environment that is. If you feel up to it, would you have that person reach out to me? I'd love to hear about their experience.
I mean, it was a few years ago, but yes, I will. I'll
It's
have
still
her reach
relevant,
out
though.
to you. For
It's still
sure,
relevant.
for sure.
And we have, one of those things is making sure that our students with disabilities, students who are coming to Stargate, that we have not only accommodations, but just even in how we're looking at a body of evidence, right? Like, do we make sure that we have our enlarged assessments? Are we collecting authentic demonstrations of their gifts and their talents versus, again, just a bubble sheet? And that's been a huge shift in the last few years.
Right.
So, thank you.
And I want to say thank you both for your generosity of showing us around, giving us a tour, seeing all the great things happening at Stargate. So one of my sons, who just turned 8, is really into Big Hero 6, and every time he watches that, I think of Stargate, and so on the robotics program and all that, and so it's just been really neat. And yeah, the parking lot, the space, the senior thing was it was really neat to see, and really neat. And then showing the pictures of that process that you guys showed, so yeah, great things. So thank you.
I just want to say I appreciate your passion, and I have to say for Prospect Ridge too, April, you guys really do ensconce your mission and vision, and you sell it very well. So I want to tell you both how much I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Real quick, can I just add one more thing? I'm sorry, as I choke on water. I want to acknowledge, because like Lori had said earlier, we had received a letter from the charter school leaders that are within the Adams 12 boundaries. And as someone that has been a charter school mom for my whole kid's life, I could not be more excited to see the collaboration being done there and the efforts being made. So I want to thank everyone here. I know we have Prospect Ridge, obviously Stargate, also Westgate, for those efforts and that just coming together and taking those stances, and I think is really great.
Thank you. Just New America's part of that.
Yep.
We are like,
Yeah, and it was nice to see even the schools that are not chartered through Adams 12, Global Village, the Academy, be included in that. Really, I think spoke volumes of how far that the charter world has come, and the community here in the Adams 12 boundary. So thank you.
And if I could add to that, just from coming from another district, we had 6 charters in St. Vrain. And it is a unique position where you're at some level competitors, right, in terms of for enrollment. But there's no doubt everybody is there about the kids, and having, April said it perfectly, you're just right fit. What's just right for that kid? And that's, if it's at another school, we want them to be prepared, and vice versa. But perfect segue. We did not plan this. But in terms of that partnership, I want to make sure you know what an amazing person Kathy Elliott is in terms of what she's brought. Yes. I know the lift we did for one school, for what she's been doing for two, and I know this is an interim thing. I just, the partnership is apparent in this district, and I just want to acknowledge that, and I think Kathy's a big part of it.
I would agree, Kathy. I think you've done a wonderful job. I know this is not something that is overly exciting to you, and you're a little nervous, but the whole process, you were there to answer any questions we had. You presented wonderfully to DAC, and you've just come alongside everybody to make sure that it was a fluid process that they were familiar with. We didn't make too many changes, and so thank you for your time in this space.
Thank you. All right. We are going to take a 10-minute break. We've been sitting for 3 hours. We appreciate, and it really did fly by. I mean, it really did. So I want to tell you all, appreciate it. You are more than welcome to stick around, but I understand that, you know, there's other things going on. So we're going to take a break. Okay, we're ready to reconvene. What happened to our audience?
I know, I just said, I was like, wow. They left real quick.
All right, guys. We'll just keep plowing along.
I'm sure there's lots of people watching at home.
Yep,
Appreciate the positivity.
yes. Okay, on to proposed proclamation, Black History Month. I will entertain a motion to adopt the proclamation declaring February 2024 as Black History Month in Adams 12 5-star schools as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Always nice to have all our celebrations spaced out over the year. I will say that Martin Luther King, we just observed his birthday, a couple extra days there. But I think it just, some of the work that we've done in the equity and engagement space is really true. It's very accomplished, I think is a good word to say. And so I'm glad that we take the time to do these things. So is there any other comments?
No, I just add that I really, I agree that we take the time to just acknowledge the diversity, but also really listen to the lived experiences of all of our students and families in the district, and support that in many ways. And that's what I really appreciate about equity and engagement department and all the work that Marie and her team are doing. So, yeah.
Okay, call a vote.
Director Assad Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marsh Holshan,
Aye.
Director Potter.
Aye.
Okay, replacement of North Glen High School track and field. I will entertain a motion to approve the replacement of the outdoor running track surfacing system and artificial turf field at North Glen High School located at 601 West 100th Place in North Glen for a projected total expenditure of $1,100,000.
So move.
Second.
And I would just note that there was a presentation about this in December. What's changed since for the good is that the estimated cost at that time was 1.6 million. We're now at 1.1. And I think there's still some cautious optimism that the final project could be even less than that. So we're heading the right direction.
Good.
Director Assad Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marsh Holshan,
Aye.
Director Potter.
Aye.
Okay, amended fiscal year 2023-2024 budget and appropriation resolution. I will entertain a motion to adopt the amended fiscal year 2023-24 budget and appropriation resolution as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Hi, Gina.
Good evening.
Is there anything you want to share?
So you have the amended budget and the resolutions. We have a presentation sort of tied with the amended budget, but it's really more about where we are this year and where we think we're going to be next year. So I do touch a little bit on the amended budget. Do you want me to start with that, or do you have some specific questions on the budget first?
Well, we just want to wrap this up. We have to vote on this, so. is there any-
Correct. I don't know if I don't know that the presentation will provide a ton of value to the budget itself. High level, general fund, we're looking at the beginning fund balance increasing. I'm totally going with estimates from my head right now, but roughly $6 million. Total expenditures increasing around $8 million. Projected revenue increasing a little over $4 million, with ending unassigned fund balance for the general fund increasing a little over $2 million. That $2 million, it's a little more than that, can be used for one-time expenditures in the future. That's the high level. In addition, the reason for the amended budget is we're updating the beginning fund balance based on the audit,
And then we're updating our forecast for any new revenue pieces that we know of. For the general fund, it's primarily increased investment earnings. And then the updated expenditures based on anything that changed from when it was adopted in June to today.
Okay,
Any questions?
questions?
Any more detailed information you'd like?
I'll just say the other thing that can often be part of an amended budget this time of year are truing up your enrollment against your actual against projection. And the good news for us is that our projection for this year proved to be very, very close to actual. So we don't see any big swings, but there are times that if you're off a couple hundred kids and you start multiplying by $10,000 plus per kid, it adds up to a significant sum. Fortunately, we're not in that spot. Oh, did you get a free bonus cell phone here tonight?
I'll grab it. Thanks.
So fortunately, that's not a challenge for us this year.
Who was the last person that spoke?
And I was like, we might have a returning guest.
Yeah, probably Robin. Okay. All right. Did you have a question, Paula? Okay.
All right. Director Saad Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marsh Holshin,
Aye.
Director Potter.
Aye. Okay, now on to the fund balance. I will entertain a motion to adopt the amended fiscal year 2023-24 beginning fund balance resolution as presented.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'll just say that the why behind this is really in that third whereas clause. There are a number of districts, St. Vrain School District and Elizabeth, over 20 years ago that got themselves in big trouble by using fund balance to pay for ongoing expenditures, largely in staff and staff compensation. So the legislature has since said if you're going to use some of the money that you have in fund balance, we want the board to make an informed decision knowing what they're doing and some of the risks that can come with it. And we're very mindful about that in finance and other parts of our leadership team. So we're not going to take you or the district to a place that causes risk, undue risk in that space.
Director Saad Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marsh Holshin,
Aye.
Director Potter.
Aye.
Okay, now on to 2024-25 budget information.
Excuse me, just a moment. Kathy, would you be happy to look for a phone? It's at the podium.
She did say she was going to stay for this, and I was like, you've already heard it. I don't think you want to. All right, so the next piece is information.
Yep.
We approved the amended budget resolution and the beginning fund amounts. Perfect. Just want to make sure I'm not skipping ahead. All right. So Chris and I have presented this to the principals last Thursday, and then Thursday evening we presented it to DAC, IBS, the IBS group, and the classified associations. I think that was who was all in attendance. On the agenda, and I'm going to look to Chris to guide how in detail he wants to go, just based on the late hour, and I know he'll have some color commentary. But the agenda, we're going to go over some impacts of funded pupil count through the School Finance Act, a federal funds update. We've talked about this before, but the impact or lack thereof of assessed valuations on the district's revenue. We've just talked about the fiscal year 23-24 amended budget. We'll cover those highlights again with a little more information. Some upcoming potential legislative action. We'll look forward to fiscal year 24-25, and I've included a 5-year forecast.
I'll just say that I know that 3 of the 5 of you have heard this presentation, so we'll try to be mindful about that. Really the high-level takeaways that I'll just foreshadow. One of the folks last time at the evening presentation asked about comparatively, how does this budget season compare to others that you've worked through? And I think I said that night this is probably the 4th most difficult out of the 14 or so that I've been a part of. Certainly the first 3, where you're cutting the budget by 22 million, 20 million, 10 million, was more challenging than what we're going to encounter next year, but it will be a challenging budget. And the 2 primary contributors are all the COVID money that we got from the feds are now done. And we've invested that money in many places and things that we feel like we need to continue to have to some degree moving forward. So that makes it a challenging process. Beyond that, we are just further down the path in terms of being a declining enrollment district, which is true of most districts in the metro region. And the apex of how much you get through averaging has now passed us, and we're going to get into a place where the amount of subsidy we receive from the state for students who are no longer enrolled will decline. So that complicates the work further, but we'll figure it out. We do a consistently good job of engaging a variety of people to be problem solvers instead of adversaries, and I'm confident that we'll find a solution, but we want you all to know on the early end that we're heading into a difficult season.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about this, but the way the School Finance Act works for districts who are in a declining state like we are able to be funded on the higher of a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, or 5-year averaging. And so we are in a 5-year averaging area and have been for a number of years. What happens with that is it's a cushion on the front end so that in the following year you don't need to cut your revenue by 1,000 students or whatever is happening. But the ultimate result is that begins to be weaned off, and the district does have to make some tough decisions because we're no longer being funded for these additional students. And that is where we, as Chris alluded to, that's where we're getting to be. As enrollment stabilizes, that benefit completely goes away. In our 5-year projection, what's important for you to know, and you'll see that in a chart coming up, is that for 24-25 and beyond, we are showing a projection of pupil count stabilizing. We know that's not happening. Chris will share what he learned from some demographers, but we wanted to model it that way so you can see what a best case looks like, if that makes sense. We have some worst case scenarios going on, but that's a best case scenario. We stabilize. So what will happen is eventually our funded pupil count will equal our current year actual funded pupil count.
And the demographer comment is fairly simple and straightforward. There's a press release today, I believe, from the Commissioner of Ed saying that state enrollment of students declined by about 1,800 pupils statewide this year. It would be greater than that, but for having a number of migrant students who are now part of the student count in a variety of districts. And the state demographer predicted in something that was presented to the State Board of Education last week that it's around 2035 before the state returns to the high water mark in terms of student enrollment in 2020. So we just continue to be a state where there's less migration, there's fewer births, and it's going to take a while to be capturing the same number of students that we were once serving.
So here you have a visual of what the impact of averaging is doing and has done for the district. So the bar graph portion, those are the additional dollars the district is receiving for pupils that we no longer have. The orange line on top is our actual average funded pupil count using that 5-year averaging. And then the blue line is the October count funded. So you can see where we have that leveling projection for 24, 25, and beyond. Those two lines will eventually intersect, and we will receive $0 benefit. In fiscal year 23-24, that's this year, the current year, that's the highest number of kiddos that we're being funded for that we don't have, and that is 1,800 kids. Next year, we'll be funded for 1,740, roughly, kids in our projections. Excuse me. So all that said, going forward, our per pupil dollar amount that we receive will really mostly be impacted or solely be impacted based on inflation. So we have a couple columns that we're calling out. So first, I know I have it third, but we'll talk about inflation first. So in the current year, our per pupil amount was increased by 8% because of inflation. that number lags a year. So just released last Thursday was the inflationary number that will apply to 24-25 based on this last calendar year of 5.2%. You can see what we're projecting for the upcoming years. These, of course, are just projections, and we will certainly be monitoring and updating those projections as we get new information. I wanted to point out the at-risk percentage amount. So you can see in 21-22, that was the first year the district reached the magic 40% at-risk funded students. And we've talked about it a few times, and in a future slide, we'll share a little bit about why it's important. In the current year, we're up to 52%, and in our projections, we're projecting that we'll stay around 52%. As we decline in enrollment, it's looking like the higher poverty families are staying in the district and the less poverty families are moving out. I don't know if that's the truth, if that's the reality of what's happening, but as that number increases, that's what it looks like. So we could expect to see that perhaps increase. The state has made some changes on how we capture that information, so that could be a result of our increased number as well. Why this is important is in the current year, we're projected to receive $24.3 million in at-risk funding. And so incredibly important that we capture the number of students that qualify for the free and reduced lunch. I believe it's about $1,100 per kid. And so it's a significant revenue source to the district to serve those at-risk kiddos. And then finally, well, not finally, budget stabilization factor. You've all heard the governor is indicating that that will go to zero. So the budget stabilization factor was introduced. The name has changed a couple times. It was the budget stabilization factor, then the negative factor, and then back to the budget stabilization factor. But it was introduced in 2009-10. I don't think anyone dreamed we would still be talking about it in 23-24. I'm excited to see it go away, but as I've shared with the other groups, I'm incredibly pessimistic that it will stay gone. The state has really proven that they will balance the budget on K-12, and so I expect to see it coming back. Our projections do not provide that information. And then you can see our per pupil funding growing each year by inflation, and then for the current year, it will grow by inflation as well as the reduction of the budget stabilization factor. Okay, we talked about that the COVID money is going away, so we wanted to give you a picture of what that looks like. So the green and the orange are the different types of COVID funds we've received. And so you can see in 24-25, that will all be gone. There's a small portion of the FCC COVID funds. Those funds can be used to buy student devices. That will have to be spent by August of 24. While that is technically in 24-25, from a ability to really use it that year, it's just not going to have the impact for 24-25 that it has in the prior years, if that makes sense. So we also have some other grants. I'll just give you a brief overview of what they are. USDA, that's the school nutrition money that the district receives. And then the Department of Education, that includes title grants, 21st Century Community Learning Centers, special education funds, career and tech ed, and then other, that one changes every year, can change all the time. It's a relatively small amount of grants, federal grants, $2.5 million roughly. In the current year, it is some small grants from the Department of Human Services and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. The real big story though is you can see we're dropping from just over 50 million in the current year to about 30 million in the next year. Just important information. Okay, I'll probably just really be brief on this one. Assessed valuation has absolutely zero impact on the revenue the district receives. For our school, state equalization funding, any property tax revenue we receive is increase in property tax revenue results in an equal decrease in state funding. So has no impact there. For our mill levy overrides, there's no impact because of assessed valuation. All of our mills, with the exception of the 2018 mill levy override, are fixed dollar, same dollar every year, what we were originally awarded if by voters, same amount today. For the 2018, that is allowed to grow by inflation. So, as you know, you all decreased the total mills by 6.606 at the last meeting. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the yearly budget process. I'll be brief on this. You all adopt a budget in June. When you adopt that budget, we don't know several things. We don't know our beginning fund balance because the audit hasn't been done. We don't know our actual projected revenue because we don't have October count information. We have expenditure changes that are in the works from May until now that impact our total expenditures, as well as some items from the audit. And then we want to update our projected ending fund balance, which is what you all just approved. Okay, so what you all approved, I covered some of this. This is a little bit more detail. I don't know that you need me to read the slides to you, but this provides better. I was giving you my estimated recollection of the numbers. I think I was very close, but this provides some additional information on that.
The one term on there that you may not be familiar with is carryover, and that's our way of describing funds that have been allocated to you that you haven't spent, that sometimes a school may build up unspent money over a number of years so they can buy computers, for example, or buy a bunch of new textbooks for a content area. And so we have a meaningful amount of carryover that our schools are holding right now. So that's what that term's all about.
Thank you. And one of the questions schools had were, well, they've already been approved to spend. Why does this have to be part of the amended budget process? The reason is because you approved them last year and not this year. And so in order for the schools to have the authority to spend it, we have to update our allowable expenditures with your approval. Okay, so some legislative action. We are anticipating that the supplemental budget request will go to the General Assembly on January 19th. The reason why we care about it is Chris has shared some information about the supplemental at-risk funding that the district has due to us from the prior 2 years, as well as in the current year. Because of that magic 40% at-risk number, one of our charter schools is grandfathered into receiving 100% of funding above and beyond their at-risk percentage. And so because of this statute, the state is supposed to backfill us for that additional amount of money. We're estimating for 21-22 and 22-23 to equal around $1.2 million. Those would be one-time funds that the district would receive should this be part of the supplemental and approved. And then we expect to also receive additional funding for the current year in that $600,000 range. And that we would forecast as ongoing revenue, which we would be monitoring every year and watching the at-risk percentages for those charter school students.
I think there's also a real possibility on that point that we may get money for the past years that the General Assembly arguably owes us that money. I could also see them changing the law so that grandfathering doesn't continue moving forward. And right now the school that's grandfathered is Stargate. So it could be, they say you need to get money passed through to you that matches your at-risk count, much like Westgate and PRA and New America do, and no longer be grandfathered in the state filling that in.
Good point. I've already shared the inflation rate was released on January 11th, 5.2%. Just for your knowledge, we do not expect to receive the School Finance Act until March at the absolute earliest. There have been years we've received it much later than that, and so we will continue to monitor what we know, but until the School Finance Act is actually released, it's completely our forecasting and projecting. So everything I'm sharing in our 5-year forecast is absolutely subject to change. I've already mentioned that the governor and JBC have indicated that the budget stabilization factor will go away. And then I want to share a little, just brief update. You've heard about the school finance task force. And so there is some risk that to the district in creating some uncertainty about our funding, that the General Assembly will change the School Finance Act. We don't know if or how it will change. A frustration for members who've served on the task force, as well as those of us paying attention, is the state has run models for the task force based on some of their recommendations, but they won't release the formulas. So one of the items they have talked about wanting to change is the placement in the way the formula works for cost of living. Well, if we don't know where to place it in the formula, we don't know how the math will work, if that makes sense. So stay tuned. We're continuing to watch, monitor, and follow up, but something important to be aware of that could impact all of our forecasts at this point in time. And then the last thing I'll share on that is there has been dialogue of the General Assembly potentially requiring school districts to share the MLO, mill levy override revenue, with the CSI schools that fall within their district. Why that's important to us is CSI schools in Adams 12, the number's roughly 4,700 students. That number would reduce the amount the district can keep. So just a FYI, something we're monitoring, but something to be aware of. Okay, so looking forward to fiscal year 24-25. In retrospect, I feel like I should have taken that first budget out because I've hammered in that assessed valuation has absolutely no impact on our funding. However, I do want to share, while it doesn't impact our funding, in our forecasts, we are showing that assessed valuations for the 24-25 school year will stay relatively stable, probably a slight increase, because this year for 24-25 is a non-reassessment year. Property values are assessed every other year. We are projecting that they will actually decline in 25-26 because of what we've heard about the overinflated valuations. Of course, who knows what's going to happen by that time? That could all change. Again, no impact to our revenue. We will receive the same revenue regardless of those assessment rates. We're forecasting the impact of inflation and the elimination of the budget stabilization factor to increase our revenue. And then conversely, we're looking at the declining enrollment impact and interest rates decreasing our investment earnings revenue. We've already talked about that federal funds will decrease roughly $21.1 million as those COVID dollars go away. And then myself and Aaron will be paying attention very close to the March economic forecast to help us with our continued efforts to do our forecasting. Again, just a high-level understanding of the impact to those one-time funds going away. For the grant portion, we have about $8.7 million funding roughly 91 FTE. That funding does not exist anymore. I have a breakdown of the grants that are impacted with that. And then there were also decisions made using one-time dollars from the general fund, around $3.4 million or 35.5 FTE that we need to talk about. They were items that were much needed, but conversation needs to happen about should those continue and what decisions do we have to make as a district. I think something Chris has really done a great job of assuring people is just because this funding source goes away doesn't mean these positions go away. It needs to be much more nuanced than that and understand what are the needs and what makes sense to serve kids. Okay, so here is our 5-year revenue forecast. You can see for 24-25 that we're projecting total revenue to increase by 2.92%. You may be wondering, well, wait, you told me inflation is 5.2% and the budget stabilization factor is going away around 1.5%, I think. Why is revenue only growing 2.92%? Great question. So here is the impact of our declining enrollment. So our projected district-funded pupil count will decline, based on our projections, almost to 1,028 students. That results in reduced funding year over year of $11.6 million. Because of inflation, our total revenue increases by $19.6 million. So you offset that 19.6 with the 11.6, and then we add the elimination of the budget stabilization factor, 6.7, and that results from the School Finance Act in new revenue of about 14.7 million. I know that's a little complicated. Does that make sense?
Gina, the one question I have now that we actually have the 5.2 as opposed to like placeholders we had before, is the 19.6 on there, is that 5% or 5.2?
It's 5.2, and I didn't update the slide.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This is your third time seeing it. You finally caught my error. I've done this now. This is my fourth time presenting this, and I never caught that. So thank you for the question. That was a good catch. The other thing I want to point out is in our forecast, we are projecting, and based on what you heard tonight from our charter schools, we're projecting that their enrollment's going to remain stable. We're not seeing our charter schools having that declining enrollment that the district has. And so what that results in, because of the inflationary increase and the elimination of the budget stabilization factor, is the allocation to charter schools is projected to increase nearly $2.8 million. That doesn't reduce our revenue, it increases our expenses, but I wanted to point that out because I think it's important for you to understand that piece. Okay, and while the School Finance Act is the bulk of our revenue change, there are some other items that we're projecting some variances with, primarily our mill levy override. Because of the 2018 growing by inflation, we're projecting to receive almost $2.5 million more there, which is good news. Categoricals also increase by inflation, so that's another $1 million. Charges for services, that's the services we offer to charter schools and then charge back to them. We have to count that as revenue. Based on inflationary increases, we're projecting that will grow by $67,000. And then our state revenue, which this number is primarily UPK and then 2 smaller state grants, we're projecting that's going to go down by $163,000. It could remain flat, but the state has only indicated that for the UPK funding that they're looking at only growing that by 2%, so not even meeting inflation on that piece, which is very disappointing. And then the big piece that we will continue to revisit, although I would say for investment earnings, I would count those as one-time funds because the district has nearly no control over them. It's really based on our interest rates. So 2 years ago, the district only earned about $160,000, give or take, in investment earnings. This year, we're looking at about $5 million. And so prior to, when we were first putting this projection together, it was before we had the 5.2% inflationary number, which, just for your information, we received about 15 minutes before the presentation, so we quickly updated all of the numbers. With that inflationary number being higher than was originally projected, we do think interest rates are not going to go down as much as we originally thought. So we'll be revisiting that. It may not be as dire as going down $3.8 million, but that's what we're currently projecting. And then we're projecting the SOT dollar amount. That's when you pay your car registration. We're projecting that to go down a very small amount based on interest rates and cost of living. We're anticipating maybe there will be less cars purchased. But again, that number could go either way is the truth. So all that said, we're looking at a total change in revenue of about 14.1 million, increase in revenue of 14.1 million. Okay, so here we have our 5-year forecast for expenditures and transfers. I really want to first set the stage of how we came up with these numbers. First, We increased salaries by 5.2% as if we were doing a salary compensation increase of 5.2%. We used inflation. No magic to that, we just used inflation. We projected that benefits for health insurance will increase 5%. And then the rest of the expenditures, we forecasted our operating expenditures to grow by 2.5%. That's a pretty modest increase, 2.5%, based on the inflationary numbers we're seeing. But we don't have a great way to estimate that piece, and so we went with that 2.5%. Additionally, we added those one-time expenditures from the grants, those costs to this. So we've increased the 24-25 and beyond budgets by those one-time dollars as if we're choosing to continue to fund them. Very important to know that those are the assumptions we've used. Lori, did you have a question? Okay.
And the why behind that is it's very easy to create panic in the system early in the budget process when folks feel like, gosh, I think my position was COVID funded. They're gonna cut it and I have to start looking for a job, or my position was grant funded, or the district really has in mind that they're just gonna give all employees a 1% compensation increase, and that's what they've modeled somewhere. So the way that we've been doing budget projections for a while is to say, let's start with compensation increases that contemplate step increases for certified and classified staff that ideally match the rate of inflation, and that you keep everything else that you have in place. And then we can start to thoughtfully consider what things need to be skinny down from there. But we're just trying to avoid people feeling like we've pre-decided who's staying, who's going, how much compensation we're gonna do, because we're honestly very far away from knowing any of those answers.
Yes, so you'll see that with all of those assumptions, that the total expenditure increase for 24-25 is about 6.77%. If you remember from the prior slides, revenue is growing 2.9%. So leaving our transfers to people activities, athletics, and capital reserve flat, we made no changes there. We would spend, and I can't see that print, $34.8 million more than we've received in revenue in fiscal year 24-25. So here is a high-level summary of what fund balance would look like. So we have a forecasted beginning fund balance of $85.2 million, the overspending of $34.8 million, resulting in a fund balance at the end of the year of $50.4 million. Here's a more detailed look of what that looks like, and why this is important for you to see is our current requirement for unassigned is to maintain at least 4%. To maintain 4% of unassigned fund balance, we would need that number to be $19.8 million, and it's negative $8.9 million. So that's a gap of $28.7 million. So in order for us to meet the board requirement of $19.8 million, we would need to reduce expenditures by $28.7 million in 24-25.
And I know that's a big number, a staggering number. I'd also point out that a 5.2% comp increase is almost $20 million. So part of why this is so dramatically skewed is contemplating the 5.2%. To be candid, I just don't see any feasible way to come anywhere remotely close to a 5% comp increase, even though I'd like to keep employees caught up with inflation. The declining enrollment factor just makes that not feasible for us in our current finances.
So I was asked to put together this slide. This is a new one to show what the unassigned fund balance would be if there was a change to make it 3%, 2%, or 1%, and then that impact on the total expenditures that need to be reduced. And so you can see how that changes. In no way, shape, or form am I making a recommendation on that. Just wanted to show you what the numbers look like.
I'm not making a recommendation either, but I would just share some background that historically the board's unassigned fund balance, there wasn't any sort of policy parameters around it. the external auditors encouraged the board to adopt parameters probably 2 years ago. Initially on, I think the board's parameters were, actually, I think it's always been 4 to 7 in terms of once you've had a formal policy. As a matter of practice in the past, the board for a long time had a 10% fund balance requirement, 3% for Tabor, roughly 3 or so percent for longevity stipend payments to be made in future years, and roughly 3% to a touch higher for other unassigned fund balance purposes. I encourage the board, when you adopt the 4 to 7% rule a year or so ago, to have it be at 4% instead of 3%, given the high inflationary environment we were in, having more money in the bank if that inflationary curve continued just seemed like a good hedge for us to have. Now that inflation's taming quite a bit, one of the things to consider is whether skinning that down to 3%, a 3 to 6% range instead of 4 to 7, or some other range makes sense. I'd have some angst personally about going lower than 3, but 3 to me feels like a comfortable and reasonable place too, given that inflation is taming down quite a bit. Certainly something to talk about more in the meetings ahead.
Yeah, I would need one of those AED devices if we went to 1%. Okay, and so we talked about this a little bit, but the last slide I have, well, the last slide with new information is the cost of a 1%. And so you can see the amount for certified, classified, and admin, and that would total just under $4 million for a 1% increase. You can multiply that by 2, 3, 4, 5 to see the dollar impact. All right, and then our last slide, do you want me to do this slide, Chris, or would you like to? Okay, so last slide, just reiterate that the increased property taxes that our community is paying does not result in any new money to the district, and certainly not any sort of windfall funding. The amount we're receiving due to averaging for declining enrollment is decreasing. You saw that chart that is a good visual. And then just because some funding is going away for specific positions does not mean that those positions will go away. We talked about some of the School Finance Act changes. We believe that the budget stabilization factor will at least temporarily sunset. We're looking at some potential changes to the School Finance Act, and just know that in January, we don't know a lot. We're forecasting to the best of our ability, and we'll continue to update numbers as we go. And then based on what we do know today, we are expecting a significant funding gap. And Chris has mentioned this, but we expect that as a team, we will approach these challenges and come up with solutions that work to support our students, families, and schools.
The other concept I would let folks know that could be part of a recommendation moving forward is that there are times when you have the possibility of and/or optimism about going out seeking and receiving additional funds through things like a mill levy override, that there could be some comfort in spending, I would say, a modest amount of one-time money to continue some positions with the hope that you might get some ongoing revenue streams to support those positions beyond the current fiscal year through a successful election. So I just toss that out there. I'm growing more and more of the belief that a mill levy override recommendation will be forthcoming from our Blueprint Task Force. That group will be meeting soon. I think the reality of it is that we're now 9th out of 10 peer districts in terms of mill levy override revenue per pupil, and we're trying to compete against all those other districts in terms of compensation, staffing, and programming when many of them have more than $1,000 more per student per year, more than $30 million per year when you look at the number of kids in our district, and that starts to be significant in your ability to compete to meet the expectations of the community. So it could be, if polling shows that that has a reasonable probability of success and you all have some comfort with using a small amount of money on a one-time basis to the extent we have some one-time money to use, There could be a small number of staff that we feel like we need to have for next year with hopes that we'll sustain them later on. And then if you have an unfortunate negative outcome, we'd have to reduce those positions for sure in 25, 26. Just another possibility to try to make the puzzle work the way that we would want it to.
Well, I appreciate when you both were presenting the other night, and Chris, you asked, for everyone to raise their hand, 5 and higher, feeling on fire about this and having some angst, and then, under 5 is cool as a cucumber. And I couldn't see what you raised your hand, but I think Lori and I kind of shot our hands up at the 5 or higher, feeling stressed about it. And then you came and it's like, well, I'm as cool as a cucumber. And that was a little comforting after seeing all the numbers and the projections. And so I do. I know we'll figure it out. We have, again, like you said, this is the 4th hardest budget year that you've experienced in your tenure. And so, yeah, it's really intimidating to see this, but I have hope, so.
Yeah, my experience is that it's a big roller coaster. Looking at my colleagues to the right-hand side of the room, we've often, as we spend hours, sometimes multiple days per week, as you get into the more intense part of budget planning, there's moments in those things where you have elation that you've just found some way to solve part of the budget problem, and you've got creative ideas, or there's different ways of accounting, or maybe mistakes that you've seen somewhere along the way that cut for the good, and so you're celebrating. And then there's other moments that you feel like you've got some brilliant idea, and then whoever's in the finance seat says, nope, that's not so smart after all, and then you feel a sense of despair. And we'll have the up and down process, but the one thing that will carry you through is if you have folks that have trust in your CFO, your finance team, in your leadership team, and in your board to be honest, transparent, and to be problem solvers. And I think we have that deeply embedded throughout our system, and that will help us get through.
I always feel like we're just rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. And I feel like some of those chairs got thrown overboard. But it's early, I know. Okay. Thank you, Gina.
I'm going to do a little bit of wondering out loud. I'll just say candidly that our charter presentations went probably about 2 to 3 times as long as I had anticipated. So we have some things on the agenda here tonight that contemplated that we'd get through those items quicker. Given that Dave's been here all the way through, and I think graduation and dropout data is a fairly efficient monitoring reports to go through, and that we're already more than half a year past when those kids finished with us, I would recommend that we go forward with those. But I wonder if the bylaws stuff, Phil too has been here for a long time, but he kind of is always, as part of the gig he's got, I wonder if bylaw discussion could be something we take up at the next one. That's probably in part something up to you all, and Phil may have something to say about that too.
The board met its obligations under the bylaws when it put that item on the agenda in December, and it can consider them or discuss them whenever it wants, so no rush.
Means that our agenda on the 7th is sort of thin at the moment. If there's no objection, can we just move the bylaws to the 7th?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that takes care of number 8. Do we want to jump ahead to the monitoring reports to honor Dave Baina's?
I think 9 and 10 are fast, so we'll let Dave do the slow walk up to the podium, and hopefully you can chip away at 9 and 10 while he's doing that.
All right. Number 9, review of resolution, delegation of authority to superintendent to execute documents. I will entertain a motion to adopt the resolution, delegation of authority to the superintendent to execute documents as presented.
So move.
Second.
Discussion?
Director Sod Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marsh Holshin,
Aye.
Director Potter.
Aye.
Okay, number 10, minutes. I will entertain a motion to adopt the minutes of the special board meeting of December 18th, 2023, the regular meeting of December 20th, 2023, and the work study session of December 20th, 2023, as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Director Sod Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marsh Holshin,
Aye.
Director Potter.
Aye.
Okay, internal monitoring report, ends policy 1.2 graduates. I will entertain a motion to acknowledge that the board has received a monitoring report as of January 17th, 2024, for the period July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023, of the superintendent concerning board policy 1.2 graduates, and finds that the superintendent's interpretations are reasonable and supported by data that is relevant, justified, and complete.
So move.
Second.
Dave? Yeah.
Evening, board members, Superintendent Godowski. This first monitoring report around graduation rate has a lot of positive news, positive information in it. One point to emphasize related to graduation rate, we're tracking a group of students when they enroll as ninth graders until they graduate. And in fact, there are really 4 graduation rates that are calculated: a 4-year, a 5-year, a 6-year, and a 7-year. Typically, we're looking at the 4-year graduation rate. In this case, generally the class of 2023, so when they came in as ninth graders in the fall of 2019, then graduating in 4 years in spring of 2023. One difference in the last 2 years with this graduation rate is it used to be just getting 23 credits in specific areas qualified you to graduate. Now it's that, as well as a competency, passing a measure of competency in reading, writing, and communicating, and mathematics. So graduating is more rigorous now than it was prior to 2022. And what you'll see on the first page, the first data tables, it lists the 4- and 5-year graduation rates. You'll see that when you look at all schools as well as non-charter schools, for both of those rates, we see increases from 2022 to 2023, which is what we would like to see. Then as we get onto the next page and are looking at the subgroup graduation rates, reporting compliance here, we have to see the graduation rate increase from 2022 to 23 and be at or above the state rate. And so as we look at all these subgroup rates, there's only 2 that decreased from 2022 to 2023. That's female and Asian graduation rates. Neither of them were large decreases. And then what we see here is that 75% of those subgroups did meet that threshold, so I'm reporting compliance there. I do want to point out that for Black students and for students with disabilities, we saw double-digit increases from 2022 to 2023, which are really remarkable. And then as we go to the last 2 tables on the last page, one of the concerns often raised about increasing graduation rates is sometimes you can do that without increasing achievement in students, and you become sort of a diploma mill. When you look at that table of the percent of students meeting both SAT college readiness benchmarks, you see a significant increase from 2019 pre-pandemic to where we are in 2023, almost a 10% increase. There is a hole in those data for 2020 when we did have no testing due to the pandemic. And then lastly, when you look at the school level data for district managed schools, every school but one saw increases from 2022 to 2023. And in particular, I'd like to point out North Glen High and Vantage Point because they had significant increases in their 4-year graduation rate from 2022 to 2023. So those would be the high points I'd like to share with you, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Is there any reason you guys that females or Asians would, I mean, is there anything you can surmise from that?
There is some variability year over year in particular classes. We're less likely to see that with females given the population size. And in terms of Asian students, that's a smaller group than females, so you tend to see more variability. That bears, these, obviously, as we look at these reports year over year, those trends will bear watching to see if that's something that continues for female students or for Asian students.
The data point that I talked quite a bit with principals about last week was my concern about the gap in white versus Hispanic four-year grad rates. It's about a 15% gap. There was a time back in 2012, I believe it was, where that gap was 3%. We've seen over time at each of our high schools, other than legacy years, where the percentage of Hispanic students who graduated in 4 years was greater than the white grad rate in 4 years, which to me is a helpful indicator that as you have cohorts of kids, you can see ups and downs and differences year over year. But if I would see consistently narrow gaps between white and Hispanic students and variation between the percentage of white and Hispanic kids graduating at a high school, I would feel like we're achieving one of the core values that I have and I think we have as a district, which is regardless of your race or your ethnicity, your gender or other characteristics, we're meeting your needs and providing the right supports for you to thrive and succeed. That gap has widened quite a bit since then, and it causes a lot of concern. And one of the charges I've given a number of folks on our team is to dig into that more robustly. We need to talk to our students and to our staff and to parents and learn more about either how kids' needs are changing in ways that we haven't adapted to, things that we once did that were working a decade ago more effectively than they are now, but continue to have that large of a gap. We're just leaving a lot of kids behind in terms of exiting high school when they could be ready and being able to move on to the next stage in their life.
One thing I would share about that point, Superintendent Gadowski, is I just ran some data for Lee Peters, our Executive Director of High Schools, because he was interested in knowing how all the district-managed high schools did. He wanted end counts and so forth. When we factored out New America Thornton, because they have a disproportionate percentage of Hispanic students at that school and their graduation rate is low, that gap shrinks to about 10%. So that shrinks that a bit. It's still not where we want it, but it does reduce it somewhat.
I hear a lot to celebrate, which is really nice to hear after a somewhat uncomfortable budget conversation. But I just wanted to call that out, that there's a lot of really great things that I'm hearing in this graduation report that I wish we had an audience so that we could applaud. And that's certainly the doubling of the students with IEPs, our students of color. And, you know, just thinking, these students came in 2019. These were our COVID students starting 9th grade, and seeing the fact that they continued to persist and we have the graduation rates we do today is wonderful.
I would say it's definitely a testament to the students, the families, and the educators at the schools working to get them the support they need to meet those goals.
And the district supporting them.
Yeah.
Call a vote.
Director Assad Lucas?
Aye.
Director Battistelli?
Aye.
Director Marsh Holshin?
Aye.
Sorry, Director Goldstein?
Aye.
Director Marsh Holshin?
Aye.
Director Potter?
Aye.
Okay, internal monitoring report ends policy 1.2.1 dropouts. I will entertain a motion to acknowledge that the board has received a monitoring report as of January 17th, 2024 for the period July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023 of the superintendent concerning board policy 1.2.1 dropouts, and finds the superintendent's interpretations are reasonable and supported by data that is relevant, justified, and complete.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Highlights, Dave?
This report, just a reminder about dropout rate. We're not following a cohort of students. This looks as an annual statistic that's calculated for students in 7 through 12. So students at the upper end of middle school and high school students. A student is a dropout if they enroll in our school, leave the district, and don't enroll in another school. And they are then counted as a dropout for us. That when a student leaves, they are coded. There are a variety of codes the registrar codes them as. What happens then at the end of the year collection, the state and our district undergo a reconciliation process where they find out, we may think a student is going to a school in Colorado, but they never ended up enrolling there or attending there, and then they become a dropout. If they do go somewhere, they're no longer a dropout for us if they do enroll someplace. As we look at this information here, what you'll see is some positive information on page 2 in the table where we're seeing for each of those 4 categories, we're seeing declining dropout rate. The data overall in this report are a little more mixed, but what we see here overall as we look at our dropout rates for those 4 groups, we see a decline from 2022 to 2023, which is what we'd like to see. What I can say is the state rate was 2.1%, so the district overall, including charter schools and alternatives, was slightly above that. And obviously, we would like to get below the state rate is the goal, but I do report compliance for those 4 groups overall. As we then move into page 3, we're looking at schools, middle schools, high schools, and then I've also included the charters here so you can see how the dropout rate has changed for them. What we saw is a number of middle schools saw an uptick in terms of their dropout rates. We're looking at, specifically had a conversation with one of the middle school principals to look at what might be the situation about where these dropouts, where we thought they went, what was some of the problem solving. So we're working with one of the principals to see exactly what that was. I still haven't heard from that principal yet, but these data are relatively fresh, so I'm waiting to hear as he does his investigation. As we look at high schools, we see a little more positive data. A couple high schools saw an increase in their dropout rate, but 4 saw a decrease. As we look at the charters, what you'll see is New America saw a decline in its dropout rate, but obviously it's a very significant dropout rate. It's more than double pathway, or it's pretty much exactly double both pathways. And then Prospect Ridge and Westgate saw a slight uptick in their dropout rates. So I have to report a non-compliance in terms of schools. And then as we look at the subgroup data, again, you'll see some mixed information here. There are more groups that saw a decline, but there are a few groups that did see an increase in the dropout rate. None of them were large, particularly large. And so one of the things, as mentioned in the report, we're going to be looking at our process for how we gather documentation as students leave our system to try and make sure we know where they're going and can then not be, have them count as a dropout for us. Any questions about this report?
Director Assad Lucas?
Aye.
Director Battistelli?
Aye.
Director Goldstein?
Aye.
Director Marsh-Holshin?
Aye.
Director Potter?
Aye.
Thank you, Dave. Sorry
Thank you.
it's so late.
No, not a worry.
All right, internal monitoring report, operating limitations policy 2.5, asset protection. I will entertain a motion to acknowledge that the board has received a monitoring report as of January 17th, 2024, for the period July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023, of the superintendent concerning board policy 2.5, asset protection, finds the superintendent's interpretations are reasonable and that his conclusions are reasonably supported by data that is relevant, justified, and complete.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Pat, Greg.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks. I was going to ask for a 10-minute break so we have time to roll in our props, but I think we're just going to go ahead and roll with this without the props tonight. So, but we do have something special for you that we put together that we wanted to share with you this evening. So, for the 2.5 monitoring report, I did want to talk through some highlights this evening. So we'll start with basically why do we have 2.5? We want to ensure that the district is protecting its assets through our insurance. This policy covers a lot of territory and a lot of ground. So we're looking at insurance, we're looking at how we maintain our facilities and our information, our technology infrastructure, purchasing policies, what are we doing to protect our intellectual property, and then what do we do to make sure that we have some guardrails up when we're making large purchases for the district. So we're going to talk through some of those highlights this evening. Just a reminder, this reporting period is July 1, 2022 through June 30th, so it's always in the rears, just like all of our monitoring reports. So let's jump right into 2.5.2. This is one that can be somewhat confusing sometimes when we start to talk about things like renewal and how do we calculate those things. So the policy allows us to have up to 10% of the renewal cost of basically items that we need to facility components that we need to replace in a facility. We can have up to 10% of the total replacement cost of all district facilities. So for this monitoring report, we are reporting that we have $169.46 million in items that need to be renewed, facility components. And our total replacement cost of the district facilities is $1.32 billion. How do we calculate that, those renewal costs? So we use a program called CostLab. It's a web-based application from CB Richard Ellis or CBRE. It looks at thousands of facility components, and for each one of those facility components, each one of those has a useful life. So when you buy something, say an HVAC motor for an HVAC unit, and if that item is supposed to, or on average lives to be 10 years, on 10 years and 1 day, that item becomes deferred and is in need of renewal. So based on that, this CostLab system, again, looks at facility components and tells us, based on this and the number of items that you have that have aged out or beyond their useful life, you have this much money that you need to spend to keep your facilities running in tip-top shape. It is important to point out that the components itself, when they look at that cost, it does include labor, and CostLab is also specific to, they try to make it specific to regions of the country. So it typically would be reflective of what's happening in Colorado or the Rocky Mountain State region. Let's talk about the replacement cost real quick. $1.32 billion. That will seem, it actually is low because it is a like for like. So if we were to replace just the light fixtures in this building, it's going to be the cost of those light fixtures, so it's the supplies and materials cost as well as labor cost. So it doesn't really reflect a true replacement cost of a facility. If, say, there was some large natural disaster that came and wiped a facility out, if we were going to replace a facility, there are many things that we would have to go to address in order for that facility to be code compliant. So ADA accessibility, energy water usage, stormwater management, educational adequacy, all of these things are going to actually contribute to the full replacement cost of a facility. So when we talk about $1.32 billion, it really is like for like, and a labor cost that's associated with that. So it's not the full cost of the replacement of a facility.
I would just put an exclamation point on it. It's not even remotely close.
It's not.
Because we're looking at Thornton High School and the cost of tearing that down, rebuilding, and some of it is tear down. But that's a $250 million ballpark cost. If you did that for all 5 of your comprehensive high schools, that'd be $1.25 billion, which is almost all of the $1.3 billion for 5 schools. So if you really do a complete replacement, it would be a lot more money.
Yes. So to break this down, what this looks like for this monitoring report, again, we had, let's just call it $170 million for the sake of talking tonight, for renewal. That's an increase in almost $40 million from the last reporting period. CostLab is noting that there's a 10 to 20% cost variation from this last reporting period. As we have been talking about, total replacement cost for facilities right now, according to the CostLab estimate, is $1.32 billion. That's an increase in $257 million from the previous year, which is a 24% increase. So when all those numbers shake out, we are actually at 12.79% of our total replacement costs for renewal needs, so we are not reporting compliance for that particular part of this report. There are some categories that are missing. So as we transfer and transition from CostLab, we are moving to a new program called VFA. VFA actually will include information technology. So those CostLab estimates that you're seeing do not include anything that pertains to information technology. And I'm going to have Greg talk about that because those things also go into the category of renewal as well.
Thank you. And excuse me, I hope it's acceptable to be transparent about this point. I've got to tell you, Priscilla has been encouraging me to be a little bit less wordy, and I would suggest that one of these, this is especially appropriate for this time, if I can. Okay, right, well, I'll move along with it here. So as you can see, there's 6 categories of technology that are tracked by this monitoring report. Our fiber optic network, then also the network cabling that we have in place throughout the district, the technology in both of our data centers, also the network equipment in each of our schools and facilities. That item up there that says interactive classroom presentation systems, that's another way of saying the overhead projectors and the smart boards in the classroom, our wireless network, and also our phone system. So we'll jump to this piece. The total amount of technology that's beyond its useful life, the dollar value for that is about $4.98 million, just short of $5 million. And the bulk of that has to do with what we call our core networking equipment, or some of our critical networking equipment, which we are in the process of replacing now. In addition to that, the battery backups for the network equipment in each of our schools and facilities. As we look at the total amount of the value of these assets, IT assets or components in the district, it's about $125.3 million. That's an increase of almost $1.6 million from last year. And I've confirmed that the majority of that increase came that during that reporting period is when we finished the work on our fiber network. And it's also when we rolled out some additional instructional technology into some of our schools. And so as we look at those numbers, excuse me, we're fortunate, we're thankful to report that the total amount, the dollar value for the IT components that are beyond their useful life is under that 10% marker that we're shooting for, is just under 4% of the total replacement cost. So I'll hand it back over to Pat.
Thanks. As we transition over to VFA, 2 things will happen. One is we'll bring these costs, these renewal costs, into the total picture as we look at our total renewal costs for the district, but also we're going to see an increase in the total replacement cost for our facilities because it measures things differently. So we should see that scale kind of go together. 2.5.3 talks about uptime and available instructional hours and having our facilities open. How this relates to this whole big picture is, again, if we are not spending our money appropriately on keeping our facilities maintained, then we're going to have times of lost educational opportunities in schools because we've had facility components that have failed. That's not counting snow days or things that Mother Nature throws at us. It's things like again, like an HVAC or a boiler goes out because we've not maintained that boiler in the appropriate way. So happy to report that we do not have any facility closures associated with component failures for this reporting period. 2.5.4 is kind of an extension of that as you start to look at now, though, more equipment and systems. So a big one for us, at least for business services, before I hand this back over to Greg, is CDE required annual bus safety inspections. So you'll see in the report that we do occasionally will miss those inspections. That's typically because we have a bus that's already out of service for repair. It's either in our shop or possibly in another shop being repaired for full motor replacement or something like that. That bus, when we get it back, it does not go into service until the CDE inspection has been performed. So we don't ever have buses on the road that are not current with their CDE inspection. So if they're not current, they're parked, and it's typically because they're already in a repair state. We also have some network availability stuff that we need to talk about real quick.
Thank you. So network availability plus the additional bullet point that you see up there are student information system, HR and finance systems. Those are covered in terms of their uptime for the monitoring report. We're grateful to say that for this monitoring report, that during instructional hours, we had 100% uptime during that reporting period. Also, just for full disclosure and looking forward to next year, for the current stats that are being completed, in early September of this year, we did unfortunately have a network outage that resulted in complete outage for just over 6 hours in the middle of the school day. So next year, we won't be able to report 100% uptime. Hopefully, we'll still hit that 99% uptime as required by this report. So moving forward here, policy 2.5.6 requires the district to protect intellectual property, information, and files from loss or significant damage. We think that this is an appropriate time to bring up what is most likely the most common cause of loss of intellectual property and files, electronic files. and that would be cybersecurity attacks. And so just wanted to mention, if there's really a handful of ways, the most common ways that hackers can break into networks. One is by, if we have laptops and so forth that are not appropriately patched, also by emails, phishing attacks, emails with the malicious code in there. Also, if people are just trying to brute force hack into our network, and then also if folks navigate to websites that have some malicious code on there that can infect networks. And so some of those stats up there, we have approximately 56,000 devices, from student Chromebooks, staff laptops, and then also PCs that are on the walls to run those overhead projectors. And so there's a lot of work that goes into keeping those patches current to protect against the most current viruses. We have approximately, on average, 325,000 inbound and outbound email messages per day. And some software that we use to monitor those flags roughly 20% of those as malicious. They never reach inboxes. So there's a lot of attempt to get into our network that way. And then also, it's really fairly stunning. There's an average of about 35 million attempts per day to hack into our network from all over the world. It's pretty daunting, actually. And then also, staff and students visit an average of about 30 million websites every single day. So there's all kinds of opportunity for, some cybersecurity mischief there. And also, if you look at the K-12 space as a whole from 2016 to 2022, approximately 10%, or just under 10% of all districts in the country reported some sort of cyber, quote, event. Most cyber experts believe that that number is severely underreported. And so I never want to miss an opportunity to express my appreciation for district leadership, for our superintendent, for the board over the years. You all have been extremely supportive of investments in both technology and staffing to allow us to kind of put up a good fight. We're not 100%, no network is 100% safe from hacks, but we feel like with the resources that have been sent our way or funded, we have a better chance than most. So I very much want to express my appreciation for that.
Okay, jumping ahead here to 2.5.7, and I promise we're not going to talk about all of these, but we're just going to hit some of the highlights. These are those guardrails we were talking about for large purchases that we make within the system. So purchases over $500,000 outside of implementing the bond require a board approval. You all have, we've talked about tonight, we had a second reading of a decision information report. So typically what we're going to do is we're going to bring those types of purchases to you. Again, these are purchases that are outside of implementing a bond. We'll bring those to you, and you'll have two. The first reading of that is going to be us explaining what the project is, why we need it, the alternatives to making the purchase, and then the second time that we'll bring that to you is typically the next board meeting for you to ask any final questions that you have and then call for a vote. In this reporting period, we had 10 purchases that exceeded the $500,000 mark. All were involved either bond implementation or they did receive board approval. So all looks good there. 2.5.9. This is one that we don't talk about a lot because we don't necessarily buy land a lot. So in this reporting period, we did purchase 3.35 acres directly west of the Future Forward at Washington Square campus. We do have requirements that we do a fair amount of due diligence before we make those purchases. So through that process, you will see that we go through appraisals, we look at phase one, environmental assessments, ALTA surveys, geotech surveys. There's a long list of that work that we do, and it's a lengthy process, but it makes sure that the land that we're buying is of use to us and its value, and we're not buying somebody else's problem. So for the 3.35 acres, in this case, we did have board approval on August 17th, 2022. We ended up, after that initial board approval, the final negotiated purchase price was $6,500 over the appraisal price. So we did come back to the board and ask for the board to waive policy 2.5.9 and allow us to pay that $6,500 over the appraised price. The other part of this board policy requires us to make sure that we're notifying cities or other potential partners in that space. So in this case, it's in the city of Thornton, and we did notify the city of Thornton of our intent to buy this land on August 19th. And then finally, I think this is getting close to the end here, 2.5.10. It's some similar things with disposition of property. We want to make sure that anything that we sell is a fair market value, and we don't relinquish property that would be resulting in the property having a negative economic or accessibility or disadvantage to the district. So if we do sell things, which is not very often or not a common occurrence, it is something that we'll bring to you as well, and that we'll make sure that we do our due diligence, so we're not going to cause a problem for boards and staff of the district in the future. So for this reporting period, we had one area, 2.5.2, which is that renewal, those needs for renewal and deferred maintenance that we are reporting non-compliance. And at this point, without a significant investment in district facilities, we'll continue to report non-compliance in that space. And that is it.
Questions, comments?
Director Assad Lucas?
Aye.
Director Battistelli?
Aye.
Director Goldstein?
Aye.
Director Marsh Holshin?
Aye.
Director Potter?
Aye.
Thank you very much, guys. Sorry it's so late. Thank you. Okay, consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve agenda items E2 and E3 as presented.
So move.
Second.
Any comments, questions?
Director Assad Lucas?
Aye.
Director Battistelli?
Aye.
Director Goldstein?
Aye.
Director Marsh Holshin?
Aye.
Director Potter?
Aye.
Okay, on to future agenda items. I can see what's listed here. Hopefully nothing really lengthy. That is true. I just have to comment, I had a Facebook memory come up. I actually was at a board meeting about 10 years ago to the day that went till 12:30, so I think we're doing okay. Anything here that anybody has any comments or questions? Well, then I'm going to call us adjourned.
Good night, get some rest.
Drive care.